If only there was a way I could simply summarise Vicious Fun in a couple of words. It's nasty enjoyable.
Sorry to interrupt your meeting.
Thanks so much for coming out. How do you maintain your lifestyle and keep your urges under control?
I murder the same victim repeatedly.
Just give me a mask.
Have you ever bitten into a kidney?
What is this, some kind of support group for serial killers?
Why are you here? It's complicated.
Vicious Fun was directed by Cody Calahan, who co-wrote the script with James Villeneuve. No relation. A nerdy 1980s film critic for a national horror magazine finds himself unwittingly trapped in a self-help group for serial killers. With no other choice, he attempts to blend in or risk becoming the next victim. Welcome back to Game Over Movie Reviews. My name's Peter and this is my movie review of horror comedy Vicious Fun. This was my fifth and final film of the Glasgow Film Festival, and to be honest, it was a total punt. The title, poster, and I mean look at that poster, and the synopsis were enough to totally entice me and just give it a try. A quick stroll down Nostalgia Avenue. Way back at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, I spent all my pocket money and then all my first part-time job pay at the local video shop. Yes, before the joyous convenience of streaming, you had to go to an actual shop to get a video. Yes, this is even pre-DVD. And I went to my local video shop so often, the local manager knew me by name, and I watched pretty much every single film in that video shop. I mention this because Vicious Fun takes me back to those days. The nostalgia. This film's cover, title and synopsis would have had me snapping up Vicious Fun off the shelves of that shop. And Vicious Fun is also purely of that era. It's over the top, neon-soaked, garish, very silly, and all out to entertain. So as always, let's start with the good stuff of Vicious Fun. Well, firstly, that premise is an absolutely killer, pun intended, idea for a horror comedy. Joel is a nerdy, nervous, awkward type, and after trailing his housemate's new boyfriend to a bar, a housemate he's desperately in love with, he gets absolutely shit-faced and passes out in a store cupboard. When he wakes up, he realises he's stumbled into a self-help group for serial killers and must pass himself off as a serial killer so not to be serial killed. And I think that's a truly great idea. I will say it doesn't quite unfold the way I hoped, but more on that later. The cast here are all having an absolute whale of a time. Evan Marsh as Joel plays it for laughs as his character is nerdy, awkward, but also a little bit cocky. Almost like a mix of Ferris Bueller with one of the Frog Brothers from the Goonies. He's hard to love from the off because he's actually a little bit of a dick and he's a little bit stalkery when it comes to his infatuation of his housemate. But Marsh eventually gets you on board with his likeable, bumbling comedy timing. The serial killers, Ari Millen as Bob, Amber Goldfarb as Carrie, Julian Richings as Fritz, Robert Mailer as Mike, Sean Bayek as Hideo and David Kirchner as Zachary, are all kind of having vicious fun in each of their roles. I just wish we got to see a little bit more of all of them. The gore of Vicious Fun is decent. If you're a bit of a gore hound, there is just enough of the red stuff flowing to keep you appeased. There is a but here, which I'll get to in the negatives. The midsection of Vicious Fun takes part in a police station, which is manned by three very amusing cops. These mustachioed law enforcers are utterly useless, though they have a very high opinion of themselves. They reminded me of the detectives from Hot Fuzz, played by Rafe Spall and Paddy Considine, and I'd probably say these were my favourite characters in the film. It's a little bit of a disappointing statement considering this film was almost entirely populated by serial killers. The production design, cinematography and synthy score all bring to mind that era I spoke of in the intro. And there are definite direct nods to filmmakers like John Carpenter, and this all comes together to create a very retro, nostalgic film, which I think will really hit home for a lot of people. Finally, I really enjoyed the ending, where the characters end up is very satisfying, and it kind of leaves it open for a sequel, which I would not be totally against. Are you ancient enough, like me, to be able to remember video shops? And do you miss those days too? And what's your favourite horror comedy of all time? Let me know in the comments below. If you're having some vicious fun with this review, please hack and slash that subscribe button. And if you like this video, please like this video. To the not so good stuff of Vicious Fun. I think my biggest issue with this film is that it doesn't make the most of its really cool premise. It actually moves away from its initial setup quite early on and turns into a kind of chase cat and mouse slasher horror comedy. It's a real shame because we're introduced to these serial killers, they're all given a bit of introduction, but you never really learn anything about them. I would have liked a bit of flashbacks to some of their kills, how they operate. It just feels like the introduction of the characters and the setup is squandered a little bit. Bob, the main protagonist, the kind of alpha serial killer played by Ari Millen, is not quite as crazy and interesting as I believe the film thinks he is. I actually found Julian Riching's killer Fritz more entertaining and interesting than Bob, but again, just doesn't get enough screen time. Bob's not nearly menacing or scary enough to be a whole and convincing main threat too. He didn't really elicit any sense of fear or repulsion or tension from me. He has some okay comedy relief moments, but his character's just a little bit middling for me. Back to the gore, it is well done and there's probably enough of it, but I didn't think it was quite creative enough, especially when you're dealing with a story about serial killers. Horror fans want their gory deaths to be explosive and unique and memorable. It just feels like Vicious Fun didn't quite live up to his name in this regard. And in general, I just don't feel that the film went far enough in any of its angles. It's fairly amusing, but no real laugh-out-loud moments. It's quite gory, but not really enough or funny or creative enough with its gore. It's also not tense or scary at all because the screenplay never really puts the main characters in a situation which brings trauma for the viewer. In summary, Vicious Fun made me feel very nostalgic. The 15-year-old, which will always be part of my personality, really enjoyed this one. But the 43-year-old part of me has seen all this before and I really wanted everything turned up from 6 or 7 to a 9 or 10. I did have fun whilst watching this film, but I really wish they'd gone for it a little bit more with the vicious side. I feel fairly mischievous fun would have been a more accurate title. My score for Vicious Fun is 5.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching.
Game over, man. It's game over.